Welcome back, folks, to the Via Pinstriping page. If you are new to this channel, please consider subscribing, and if you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for watching. So today I wanted to discuss grid lines and grids used for pinstriping. So for this example I used the Staedtler Lumo Color non-permanent pencil. This is a water-soluble pencil. You can get these online. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them, I believe, at Blick Art. Probably Coast Airbrush, I believe, sells them. eBay. You can find them all sorts of places. I do have some links in the description below that actually sends you to a set of these. But anyways, these are supposed to be washable with water. Or Windex, or something easy, and it should wipe off fairly easy. I used that to create this two different sets of grid lines here, and the one on the left is an example of what you do not want to do when you make grid lines. First and foremost, you do not want to push down very hard. You want them to be barely visible, because you eventually want to wipe these things off. So if you have some very delicate pinstriping, you do some very fine line work, and you get done with the design, then you want to wipe off the grid. If you push very hard like these are, you're going to end up potentially wiping off the paint. You don't want to be aggressive with the paint afterwards, especially immediately afterwards, and you don't want, let's say, sending customers home or somebody and telling them to just wipe it gently and them having a hard time getting it off. That's probably the most important thing, is to not push down very hard on these. You want it to look somewhat like this side. Now you should be able to see, here's my center line, here's another line, here's another line. Right? Extremely lightly pressed. You probably want to use just the weight of the pencil to make your line. So you don't really want to push down at all. Just graze the top. That way when you go to wipe this off, it should come off extremely easy. Now, there is always the chance of ghost lines, which I have heard and experienced. Sometimes when you go to wipe these off, it leaves a little mark. So the less grid lines you can make, the better. If you could work off of just the center line, as some people do, that's great. If you can practice to only have a center line and you have that good eye for symmetry, that's great. I personally have one damaged right eye, and I have a extremely difficult time measuring distance. So I sort of always need a grid. At least at this point in my pinstriping, I do require a grid. The second thing that I was going to say is to not make your grid lines so small. So this is a 1/2 inch grid line. This is more or less a 2-inch grid line, something around 2 inches. For one, you're not going to be pulling moves that are so tight that you're going to require such small squares. And another thing is, you could, when you want to try to get to this square, you might end up on the wrong square because you got so many of them that it kind of defeats the purpose of understanding where you're at, because there's just so many damn squares. So you want to try to keep your grid lines nice and open. If you're working on a vehicle, maybe utilize focal points on the vehicle. That way, let's say a door, a door handle starts here, you could maybe just use that as a focal point. Consider other visual focal points as maybe stopping areas, maybe body lines and such. So that way, the less grid you have, the better. You just want enough to make sure you get by and do a quality design or do a quality job with the least amount of grid possible. It does not mean that grids are bad. If you use them to do a good job and you need them to do a good job, by far by all means use them. So here is an example of a more open grid. So I could say I'm doing a design and this one stops at the top corner of this square. I could just go to the top corner of this square, and it's very clear if I'm in the dead center of the square or the lower corner of the square, or whatever the case may be. You can sort of use these squares or rectangles as their own focal points. You could say, hey, I stopped in the middle, I stopped in the middle, or I stopped in the very corner, you know, or the line, or whatever the case may be. Where with these, you got so many of them, you could get lost on the way and end up 2 squares over, and there you already messed up. So that's another thing. Also, if you're very concerned about using a grid line, let's say you have a matte finish, something that's very, very coarse, and you're afraid that it might not wash off. I have seen, and I'm going to give a big shout out to Steve Chiseka. I have seen where he gets some fine line tape, and he'll just put some tape down. He'll start working his design around it, and then he'll pull the tape off, and then maybe do a little something in the center, depending on how thick you want. You could use maybe thicker or thinner tape. I have personally used little bits of tape to say, hey, I want to go out this far, and then, you know, pre-measured, obviously, and then I want to come up to here, and then I see this as like the middle, and then I see this as like the other side, right? So little bits of tape. That way, this kind of gives me more focal points to go off of, if in case you're very uncomfortable drawing a grid on whatever surface that you're using. The idea is that this stuff comes right off, and you're left with whatever design that you want to do. There are other options, and to be completely honest, I've yet to find a perfect grid making material. I have had issues with this still leaving me ghost lines, and it could be due to my inexperience, could be maybe I pushed down too hard, I don't know. But there are also grease pencils that you can use. I think they're just called grease pencils. I have also used the Paper Mate flare tip size medium, which I got that. Let's see if I can get this thing to focus. I got this idea from Elroy Kirkendall. No, it's not. Well, anyways, it says Paper Mate size medium. It's like a thin marker, basically. And these do come off quite easily. But I did have some issues with paint coming with it when that happened one time. And the other option that I use are wet erase markers. You get them anywhere, and those also wipe off quite easily. Actually, if you spray them with Windex, they just kind of disperse completely, but yeah, those wipe right off. So like I said, I've yet to find a perfect grid making material or pencil or anything. There is also some patterns that you can buy. I can't think of the exact name of it, but it uses the powder. You kind of pounce a pattern and you pull up, and it leaves you little patterns with made out of powder. But those, as you're doing your design, your fingers wiping it off, from what I understand. So I try to use stuff that will maintain while pinstriping and still being able to wipe off mistakes. The one thing that I like about these, even though, like I said, it's hit or miss whether or not your paint will grab underneath it, is that Mineral Spirits does not wipe it off, and I do not know why. Let's see. Let me get a little bit of Mineral Spirits. Now I just drew that on there, so we'll see if I'm lying, but this is mineral spirits on this rag. Yeah, I mean, it is wiping it off, but water will for sure wipe it off. So that's my little rant on grids. Hopefully it helps. Don't go too heavy is really the main thing. Don't go too crazy with the grids is the main thing. Do extremely light grids if you can. If you could work off a center line, that's awesome. If you can just figure out some focal points. Hell, I've even put dots and say, hey, look here, 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 here. Just a dot here and there. Way less noticeable than an actual line. And now what I'm going to do is, I drew these on here earlier. I'm going to try to wipe this off with a little bit of water and see if I get any ghost lines, so y'all can sort of see what I'm talking about. So I am pushing extremely hard. And let me get a fresh paper towel. Sorry about all the movement. Get a little bit of Windex. Right? Same spot, Windex. I am pushing extremely hard, and I don't know if you could tell, but they are still there. You see that? Now imagine having a design down there and you have a customer and they're wondering why the hell is there still black lines there. Now on the reverse, on the other side, we have these lines, right? And they wipe completely off because I barely push down and they are completely gone. So there is a fine example of why you do not want to push down very hard with these pencils, and a fine example as to why it's better to go light and very minimal on the grid lines. So I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions, and sorry about the shaky video. It is Thanksgiving and I had some free time before I go eat my turkey. So happy Thanksgiving and have a good day. Bye-bye.